A cracked brass compass slammed against Sheriff Daniel Mercer's boot. Its loose needle rattled inside the case, tick, tick, skitter, like a dying insect. A man clung to Mercer's leg. Caleb Rourke. The fugitive he had chased 3 days across burning desert. Rourke's fingers dug through dust and leather, refusing to let go. The compass kept rattling against Mercer's spur. Wrong direction every time the needle jumped. West. West again. Beyond the red dunes where no water should exist. Mercer looked up. A shimmer of green hid between the rocks. Palm shade. Running water. And the outlaw whispering one hoarse promise. Sheriff. They must never find this place. The compass rattled harder. The desert would not let Sheriff Daniel Mercer forget the sound. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The broken brass compass rattled against his saddle horn as his horse trudged through heat that shimmered like a living thing. 3 days of dust. 3 days of chasing a man who refused to stop running. Caleb Rourke hung slumped across the saddle behind Mercer, wrists tied, breath thin and ragged. The outlaw stirred once when the compass knocked against Mercer's spur. Tick. Scrape. Tick. A weak laugh escaped Rourke's cracked lips. Still hearing that thing, Sheriff? Mercer didn't answer. He guided the horse between 2 jagged walls of sandstone where the wind finally died. The compass kept rattling. Wrong rhythm. Wrong direction. Mercer had carried it since the moment Rourke dropped it in the sand and tried to crawl after it like a man reaching for air. The needle inside the cracked glass never pointed north. It jittered. Skittered. Dragged sideways like something alive inside the case. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Mercer hated the sound. Hated the way it followed him through the canyon like a memory that would not let go. He rode until the rock walls widened. Until the ground softened beneath the horse's hooves. Until he heard something the desert never gave. Water. Not a trickle. Not a mirage. A steady, quiet running sound. Mercer pulled the horse to a stop. Before him lay a pocket of green hidden between red stone cliffs. Palms bending in slow desert wind. A spring spilling clear water across dark soil. The horse lowered its head and drank greedily. Mercer slid from the saddle. The compass struck his belt buckle. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Rourke opened his eyes. For a moment the outlaw forgot the ropes. Forgot the sheriff standing above him. He stared at the water like a starving man staring at bread. Found it, he whispered. Mercer steadied him. You knew it was here. Rourke's gaze drifted to the compass in Mercer's hand. The needle scraped against the brass wall again. Tick. Not me, Rourke rasped. Mercer dragged the outlaw down beside the spring and tied him to the thick root of a desert palm. The ropes creaked tight. Rourke didn't fight. He only watched the compass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Mercer crouched beside the water and splashed dust from his face. The sound of the compass kept cutting through the quiet oasis. A small sound. But stubborn. Like it was trying to say something. Mercer rose and turned toward the horse. That was when he heard another sound. Soft. Careful. A foot brushing sand behind the palms. Mercer's hand drifted toward his revolver. The leaves shifted. A tiny figure stepped from the shade. Dusty curls. Sunburned cheeks. Bare feet trembling in the cool shadow. A little girl stood beside the water. Her eyes fixed on the compass in Mercer's hand. And slowly, she walked toward the sheriff's campfire circle. Morning crept slowly over the hidden oasis. Cold desert night still clung to the ground. Mist drifted above the spring like breath in winter air. Sheriff Daniel Mercer sat beside the fire pit he had scraped together from dry palm husks and dead twigs. The small flame crackled weakly. Warmth barely pushing back the chill. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The broken brass compass rested on a flat stone beside him. Its loose needle jittered inside the cracked glass. Mercer stared at it the way a man stares at a riddle he never asked for. Behind him the horse snorted softly. Leather creaked. Rope rubbed against bark. Caleb Rourke shifted where he sat tied to the thick palm root. The outlaw's eyes stayed on the fire. "Sheriff," he muttered. Mercer did not look up. Rourke swallowed. "She's still there?" Mercer turned his head slightly. The girl sat across the spring. Knees pulled to her chest. A thin blanket Mercer had tossed her during the night wrapped around her shoulders. She had not spoken once. Not when he handed her water. Not when he placed the bread beside her. Only those wide eyes watching everything. Watching the compass most of all. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The sound cut softly through the morning stillness. The girl slowly stood. Bare feet touched the damp sand beside the water. She crossed the narrow stream one careful step at a time. Cold water rippled around her ankles. Mercer noticed the way she shivered when the breeze brushed through the palms. He pushed another stick into the fire. Flames flared brighter. Warmth finally reaching the air. The girl stopped beside the stone where the compass rested. Her small fingers hovered above it. Mercer spoke quietly. "That yours?" The girl looked up. Her voice came thin and dry. "My papa's." Tick. Scrape. Tick. The needle scraped the inside wall again. She lifted the compass carefully. Held it like something fragile. Like something alive. Mercer watched her face. Something changed there. Relief. But not safety. Not yet. Rourke shifted behind them. Rope fibers strained. "She's Clara," he said hoarsely. Mercer turned. "You done talking now?" Rourke leaned his head against the tree. Sunlight caught the dust in his beard. "You caught the wrong man, Sheriff." Mercer snorted softly. "That right?" Rourke nodded toward the girl. "Been running 3 weeks keeping her alive." The fire popped. A warm gust pushed smoke through the palms. Clara crouched beside the flames. Her hands stretched toward the heat. Thin fingers trembling as warmth slowly returned. Mercer watched her a moment. Then he stood. Walked to the saddle. Pulled a small dented tin from his pack. Coffee grounds. He poured water into a blackened pot and set it over the fire. Soon a quiet bubbling began. The smell of coffee drifted through the oasis. Warm. Comforting. Clara watched the pot like it was magic. Mercer poured a little into a cup. Set it beside her. "Blow on it." She nodded slowly. Rourke watched from the palm. His voice rough. "You gonna hang me when we get back?" Mercer sipped from the pot. Hot bitterness swarming his chest. "Town's 2 days' ride." Rourke chuckled dryly. "You ain't riding nowhere today." Mercer frowned. Rourke nodded toward the cliffs beyond the oasis. "Look up there." Mercer followed the line of his chin. High on the red ridge. Dust drifted in the wind. Faint. But wrong. Horse dust. Moving slow along the horizon. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The compass rattled harder in Clara's hands. She stared at the western cliffs. Her voice barely a whisper. "They're coming." The riders on the ridge were gone by noon. Only empty sky and heat shimmer remained above the red stone cliffs. Still, Sheriff Daniel Mercer kept looking up there. Listening. The oasis had returned to its strange quiet. Palm leaves whispering. Water sliding gently over stone. And the compass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Clara sat beside the spring with the compass in her lap. Her fingers traced the cracked glass again and again. Like she expected the needle to speak. Mercer worked nearby. A small lean shelter took shape beneath the palms. Dead branches. Palm fronds layered thick against the sun. Rope pulled tight. Wood creaked softly each time he tied another knot. The work warmed his shoulders. Sweat slid down his back. Clara watched him without speaking. Finally she stood. Carried the compass across the sand. "Why you building it?" Mercer tightened the last knot. "Shade." She looked around at the trees. "There's already shade." Mercer wiped dust from his hands. "Shade that stays when the wind moves." Clara considered that. Then stepped inside the half-finished shelter. The shadow there felt cooler. Safer. The fire pit crackled beside them. Coffee bubbled low in the blackened pot. Warm smells drifting across damp soil. Clara sat near the fire. Held the compass out toward Mercer. "It's wrong." Mercer crouched beside her. "Compass broke." "No," she said softly. Her finger tapped the glass. The needle rattled again. Tick. Scrape. Tick. "It's tryin'." Mercer stared at the thing. The needle pointed west. Then shivered sideways. Then west again. Not north. Never north. Mercer stood slowly. Looked toward the western cliffs. Red stone rising like broken teeth against the sky. Nothing moved. But the air felt tighter. Like the desert was holding its breath. Behind him rope scraped bark. Rourke shifted against the palm root. "You see it too, don't you?" Mercer glanced back. "You talk a lot for a man tied to a tree." Rourke squinted toward the cliffs. "They'll come back." Mercer walked over. Untied the rope from the trunk. But left Rourke's wrists bound. "Get up." The outlaw blinked. "You trust me now?" Mercer handed him a tin cup. "Drink." Rourke drank the water slowly. The cold made him wince. He looked around the oasis. Palm shade. Running spring. The small shelter Mercer had built. Clara watching them both with silent eyes. Rourke chuckled softly. Sheriff building a home for fugitives. Mercer ignored him. He dragged a heavy fallen branch toward the fire. Wood scraped sand loudly. Clara flinched at the sound. The noise broke the quiet too sharply. Mercer noticed. He split the branch slowly instead. Steel tapping wood. Gentler. Warmer. The fire caught the new pieces quickly. Flames licking higher. Warm air spreading across the camp. Clara edged closer. Her shoulders stopped shaking. Mercer handed her a small biscuit from his saddlebag. She held it carefully. Like something rare. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice sounded stronger now. The warmth was doing its work. For a moment the oasis felt peaceful. Safe. Water murmuring. Fire crackling. Palm leaves brushing each other in the wind. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Clara looked down suddenly. The compass needle was trembling harder. Mercer noticed the direction. West. Still west. Rourke saw it too. His voice dropped. "That ain't north." Mercer didn't answer. Clara's eyes lifted slowly toward the cliffs again. Sunlight burned red across the ridge. Still empty. Still quiet. But the compass would not stop rattling. Tick. Scrape. Tick. And somewhere beyond those cliffs, the desert wind carried a faint sound. Hooves. Far away. But coming closer. Evening came slow to the hidden oasis. The heat faded first. Then the light. The desert wind cooled as shadows stretched long beneath the palms. Sheriff Daniel Mercer sat beside the fire pit sharpening his knife on a flat stone. Steel whispered across grit. Slow. Steady. The sound filled the quiet space between the trees. Across the spring, Clara sat in the sand with the broken compass resting in her hands. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The needle dragged against the cracked glass again. The sound seemed louder now in the cooling air. Rourke leaned against the palm where Mercer had tied him again after the work was done. His eyes followed Clara. "You keep listening to that thing like it's talking." Clara didn't look up. "It is." Mercer paused the sharpening. The knife edge caught firelight. Orange flicker across dull steel. "What's it saying then?" Mercer asked. Clara turned the compass slowly. The needle rattled harder when it faced west. Tick. Scrape. Tick. "My papa used to listen to it," she said. Rourke shifted. Rope creaked against bark. "Your pa was a surveyman." Clara nodded. "He said the desert hides places." Mercer resumed sharpening. Steel against stone. Scrape. "Desert hides graves too." Clara looked at him. Her voice stayed quiet. "My papa didn't die." The fire popped sharply. A log shifted. Warm sparks lifted briefly into the cooling air. Mercer said nothing. Clara looked down at the compass again. "He said the needle was wrong because the land was wrong." Mercer stopped the blade. "What's that mean?" She shrugged slightly. "He said the earth under this place pulls the compass." Rourke let out a low breath. "Magnet rock." Mercer glanced over. "You been listening too?" Rourke nodded toward the cliffs. "Old miners used to talk about it." The fire crackled louder as the night deepened. Warmth pushing back the creeping desert cold. Clara hugged the compass to her chest. "My papa found this valley first." Mercer lifted an eyebrow. "That right? He said water would save people someday." Silence settled again. Only the spring murmuring softly nearby. Only the compass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Mercer stood. Walked to the western edge of the oasis. The red cliffs loomed tall above the palm tops. The fading light turned the rock faces dark purple. Quiet. Too quiet. The sheriff listened. No hooves. No voices. Just the wind brushing stone. Behind him Clara spoke again. "My papa hid something." Mercer turned slowly. "What kind of something?" She held up the compass. "Inside." Mercer walked back toward the fire. The warmth felt stronger now. The smell of smoke thick in the night air. "Open it then." Clara shook her head quickly. "My papa said not yet." Rourke frowned. "Why not?" Clara looked toward the cliffs again. Fear passed through her eyes. "Because the bad men would come first." The fire popped again. Mercer looked west once more. The cliffs stood silent. But the desert night carried a faint new sound. A long way off. Metal clinking. Harness chains tapping softly against saddle rings. Mercer heard it clearly now. Riders. Still distant. But closer than before. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The compass needle shook harder. Clara clutched it tight. Rourke whispered under his breath. "Told you they'd come." Mercer stepped on the firewood stack. Pulled his rifle from the saddle. The metal felt cold against his hands despite the firelight. He looked at Clara. At the compass. At the dark cliff swallowing the last light of day. The oasis no longer felt hidden. The quiet had changed. It wasn't peaceful now. It was waiting. Dawn crept over the cliffs like a slow wound opening. Cold air clung to the sand. The fire Mercer had kept alive through the night burned low now. Soft orange coals. Faint warmth pushing against the desert chill. Clara slept near the embers beneath the palm shelter. The blanket rose and fell gently with her breathing. Peaceful. Too peaceful. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The broken compass rested beside her small hand. The needle rattled faintly with each movement of the morning breeze. Sheriff Daniel Mercer stood at the edge of the oasis watching the western ridge. His rifle rested against his shoulder. Stillness stretched across the desert. But Mercer had not slept. Not once. Behind him rope creaked. Caleb Rourke shifted against the palm root. "You hear it yet?" Mercer didn't answer. The outlaw squinted into the brightening sky. "They'll ride in slow," he muttered. "Men like Cale always do." Mercer turned slightly. "You sure it's Hale?" Rourke gave a dry laugh. "Only man rich enough to chase water through hell." The first sound came moments later. Distant. Faint. Hoofbeats. Slow and steady across hard desert ground. Mercer's jaw tightened. He stepped forward onto the ridge above the oasis. The sand crunched beneath his boots. Below him the palms whispered softly. Water murmured in the spring. Warm sounds of life. But beyond the cliffs, dust rose along the horizon. 3 riders. No. 5. Their shapes moved slowly through the red morning light. Clara stirred behind him. Blanket rustled. Small feet padded softly across sand. She stopped beside Mercer. "What is it?" Mercer kept watching the ridge. "Company." The hoofbeats grew clearer. Rhythmic. Heavy. The riders reached the canyon mouth by mid-morning. They didn't rush. Didn't shout. Just rode in like men who believed the world belonged to them. Dust drifted around their horses. Leather creaked. Metal spurs chimed faintly. The man in front rode a tall black stallion. Clean coat. Silver saddle plates gleaming in the sun. Victor Hale. Mercer knew the face from town posters and courthouse doors. The man swung down from his saddle with slow confidence. Boots crunching softly on gravel. His coat hung neat despite the long ride. His eyes moved across the oasis calmly. The spring. The bombs. The shelter Mercer had built. Clara standing beside the sheriff. And finally the compass in her hands. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The sound carried strangely far in the quiet canyon. Hale smiled thinly. "Well now." His voice came smooth. Cold. "Seems the rumors were true." One of his men dismounted nearby. Rifle resting easy across his arm. Another circled slowly toward the spring. Mercer stepped forward. Rifle steady but not raised. "This land ain't yours." Hale brushed dust from his sleeve. "Sheriff Mercer." The way he said the name sounded almost friendly. "Almost. I've been looking for you." Mercer didn't move. Hale glanced toward the palm where Rourke sat tied. "Well, well." The smile sharpened. "You caught my thief." Rourke spat in the sand. "Your water ain't yours either." Hale ignored him. His gaze settled on Clara again. The compass rattled harder in her grip. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Hale tilted his head slightly. "That little trinket." He stepped closer. Boots crunching. Each step slow. Measured. "My men have been searching a long time for that." Mercer shifted between them. The desert wind stirred through the palms. The warmth of the oasis suddenly felt thin. Fragile. Clara whispered beside him. "My papa said bad men would come first." Mercer nodded once. Quiet. "I believe him." Behind Hale, another rider dismounted. More dust rose at the canyon mouth. More horses. More men. The small oasis grew crowded with the sound of leather and iron. Warm water still flowed beside them. Fire still glowed in the pit. But the desert cold had returned. And Victor Hale smiled like a man who had already won. Victor Hale removed his glove slowly. Soft leather sliding from his fingers. The morning sun had warmed the oasis now. Heat rising from the damp ground near the spring. But the warmth felt thin. Fragile. Like glass about to crack. Sheriff Daniel Mercer stood firm beside Clara. The rifle rested easy in his hands. Not raised. Not lowered. Hale studied the water flowing through the stones. Clear. Steady. Endless. "Well," he said softly. "Would you look at that?" One of his men knelt beside the spring. He dipped his hand into the water. Lifted it. Watched droplets fall through his fingers. "Cold," the man said. Hale smiled. Cold water in a dead desert. His eyes moved slowly back to Mercer. That kind of miracle tends to belong to someone with vision. Mercer didn't blink. Belongs to the land. Hale chuckled quietly. Land needs ownership. Boots shifted in the sand behind him. 3 more riders had entered the oasis. Rifles across their saddles. Spurs chiming softly. The quiet canyon filled with small metal sounds. Clink. Creak. Leather sliding. Clara tightened her grip on the compass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The needle rattled harder now. Hale's eyes dropped to it again. There it is. Mercer stepped half a pace forward, blocking Clara from view. That compass ain't yours. Hale ignored the words. He walked toward the fire pit instead. Bent slightly. Held his hands over the fading warmth. The coals glowed red beneath thin ash. Warm little home you built here, Sheriff. He straightened slowly. His gaze drifted toward the lean shelter. The blanket inside. The tin cup by the fire. Domestic. Peaceful. Out of place in a place like this. Then Hale's voice turned colder. You know what happens next. Mercer remained still. Try me. Hale sighed. Almost disappointed. He reached inside his coat. Paper rustled. A folded document appeared between his fingers. Clean. Official. A courthouse seal stamped bright red on the bottom. My claim. He held it up loosely. The entire valley system from ridge to ridge. Rourke barked a rough laugh from the palm tree. That paper's worth less than sand. Hale turned his head slightly. And yet court seemed to disagree. One of his men stepped closer to Rourke. The outlaw stiffened. Rope creaked against bark. Mercer's rifle lifted half an inch. Not enough to aim. Enough to warn. Silence settled heavily over the oasis. The spring kept flowing. Water whispering through stone. Warm wind brushed the palms. Clara whispered behind Mercer. My papa said the compass shows truth. Hale heard it. His eyes narrowed slightly. That's right. He stepped toward her again. Boots crunching softly. That compass points to something important. Mercer's voice cut low. That's far enough. Hale stopped. For a moment no one moved. Even the horses seemed to hold still. Then Hale smiled again. Thin. Patient. You misunderstand something, Sheriff. He turned slowly toward the cliffs. Raised his arm. Whistled once. Sharp. High. The sound echoed against the canyon walls. Moments later the quiet desert answered. Hooves. Many. Dust drifted at the canyon mouth. More riders entering the valley. 10 now. Maybe 12. The small oasis suddenly felt crowded. Cold. The fire behind Mercer crackled weakly. Warmth shrinking under the weight of iron and leather. Clara's compass rattled violently now. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Hale lowered his arm. His voice dropped to a quiet certainty. This valley feeds towns. His eyes moved to Mercer. Then Clara. Then the compass. And by sundown. He smiled. It feeds me. The riders filled the oasis like a storm rolling into a quiet valley. Hooves ground the sand. Leather creaked. Metal tapped softly against saddles. The warm hush of the spring struggled beneath the weight of it all. Sheriff Daniel Mercer stood still beside the fire pit. The last coals glowed weak red. Their warmth barely touched the air now. Cold had crept back into the oasis. Victor Hale watched him calmly. Boots planted in the sand like he had already claimed the ground. Behind him his men spread out slowly. 2 near the bombs. 2 by the spring. 1 drifting toward the shelter Mercer had built. Mercer's rifle rose a little higher. The movement stopped the man cold. Silence fell hard. Even the horses quieted. Only the spring kept whispering over the stones. And the compass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Clara clutched it tight against her chest. Her small shoulders trembled. Hale noticed. He stepped closer again. Slow. Patient. "You know what this place is worth, Sheriff?" Mercer didn't answer. Hale looked toward the spring. Sunlight caught the water like molten glass. "Town wells run dry every summer." His voice stayed soft. "Farmers fight over mud." He glanced toward the canyon mouth where more of his riders waited. "And here sits a river under the sand." Rourke shifted against the palm. The rope rasped harshly against bark. "You'll bleed towns dry selling it." Hale looked mildly amused. "That's called business." Clara whispered. "My papa said water belongs to people." Hale tilted his head. "That's so." The girl held the compass out slightly. The needle rattled harder. Tick. Scrape. Tick. "My papa said the compass proves it." Mercer glanced down. Hale noticed the movement. His smile returned. "Ah." He stepped closer again. Boots crunching the damp soil beside the spring. "Your father the surveyman, wasn't he?" Clara froze. The warmth of the fire seemed gone entirely now. A cool breeze slipped through the palms. Hale's voice lowered. "Elias Carter." Clara's eyes widened. "You knew him?" Hale shrugged. "He got very excited when he found this place." Rourke spoke from behind the palm. "Excited enough you tried to buy him out." Hale didn't even turn. "I offered him opportunity." Rourke laughed hoarsely. "You offered him a grave." Mercer's jaw tightened. The oasis felt colder by the second. Clara stared at Hale. "My papa said you were lying." Hale smiled again. A colder smile this time. "He said many things." The sheriff stepped forward. One firm step. The sand crunched loudly. "That's enough." Hale's eyes flicked to the rifle. Then back to Mercer's face. "You're protecting a criminal." Mercer's voice stayed flat. "I'm protecting a child." Silence stretched again. The riders shifted uneasily now. Spurs chiming softly. One horse snorted. Water splashed against stone. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The compass rattled harder in Clara's hands. Mercer noticed the needle again. Still pointing west. Still trembling. Hale followed his gaze. His eyes narrowed. "What's out there?" Mercer didn't answer. Rourke leaned forward against the rope. "There's more to this valley than water." Hale turned slowly. Interest sharpened across his face. "Is that right?" Rourke nodded toward the compass. "That little toy points to it." Hale's smile widened. The desert wind rustled the palms overhead. Warm air returned briefly. But it carried dust from the canyon. More riders moving beyond the cliffs. Hale raised a hand. One of his men stepped forward and leveled a rifle toward Mercer. The quiet snapped tight like a stretched wire. Hale's voice came calm. "Here's how this ends." He looked at Mercer. Then Clara. Then the compass. "You give me the girl." His gaze returned to the sheriff. "And you walk out of here alive." The spring kept flowing beside them. Warm sunlight touched the water. But the oasis had gone silent. Cold. Waiting. Mercer lowered his voice. Quiet enough only Clara could hear. "Stay behind me." The compass rattled again. Tick. Scrape. Tick. And the desert seemed to lean closer for what came next. The oasis held its breath. Wind slipped through the palms with a soft rustle. Water murmured beside the stones. Warm sunlight touched the spring. But the air between the men felt cold. Sheriff Daniel Mercer stood still in the center of the sand. His rifle rested steady in his hands. Victor Hale waited 10 paces away. His riders spread in a loose circle around the oasis. Boots grinding sand. Leather creaking. Metal clicking softly. Clara stood behind Mercer. Small fingers gripping the broken compass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The sound seemed louder than the spring. Hale's man with the rifle lifted it higher. The barrel pointed straight at Mercer's chest. Hale spoke calmly. "You had your chance, Sheriff." Mercer didn't move. His voice stayed quiet. "You ain't taking that girl." Hale sighed. Almost bored. Pity. His hand dropped slightly. That was enough. Mercer moved first. The rifle fired. The crack split the oasis like lightning. Hale's gunman jerked backward into the sand. For a moment the canyon exploded with sound. Rifles thundered. Horses screamed. Bullets tore through palm leaves. Dry bark splintered. Clara ducked behind the shelter. The compass rattled violently in her hands. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Mercer rolled behind the fire pit as bullets ripped through the air above him. Sand sprayed. Wood shattered. Heat from the coals brushed his sleeve. He fired again. Another rider spun sideways in the saddle. The horse bolted toward the canyon wall. Noise filled the oasis. Shouting. Gunfire. Hooves pounding the sand. Rourke struggled against the rope at the palm tree. "Sheriff." Mercer fired once more. Then sprinted across the clearing. Bullets snapped past his ears. Cold wind whipped through the canyon. He reached the palm. Knife flashed. The rope fell loose. Rourke grabbed the dropped rifle from the dead rider beside him. His hands shook. But his eyes burned steady. "You should have done that sooner." Mercer nodded toward the cliffs. "Cover the west side." Rourke stepped into the fight. The outlaw fired from the palm shade. Shots cracked across the oasis. One of Hale's riders collapsed near the spring. Water splashed red into the sand. Hale stood near his horse now. Not panicked. Just angry. His voice cut through the gunfire. "Kill them." Two men rushed the shelter where Clara hid. Mercer saw them. He ran hard across the sand. Boots pounding. A rifle blast tore bark from the tree beside him. Another shot slammed into the ground near his feet. Cold fear brushed his spine. He reached the shelter just as the first man rounded the corner. Mercer's revolver spoke once. The man dropped. The second rider froze. Rourke's rifle cracked from behind. The rider spun and fell into the spring. The water splashed loudly. Then quiet returned for one long second. Smoke drifted across the oasis. The palms swayed slowly above the chaos. Clara crouched behind the shelter wall. The compass clutched tight in her hands. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Mercer turned. Victor Hale stood alone now near the canyon mouth. His men scattered across the sand. Some groaning. Some still. Hale's coat flapped lightly in the wind. His revolver hung loose at his side. He looked at Mercer with something colder than anger. "You've made a very expensive mistake." Mercer walked forward slowly. Boots crunching over shell casings. "Water ain't for sale." Hale raised his gun. The sun flashed off the steel. For a moment neither man moved. The desert fell silent again. No wind. No voices. Only the spring flowing. And the compass. Tick. Scrape. Tick. Clara stepped out from behind the shelter. The sound carried across the oasis. Hale's eyes flicked toward her. Just long enough. Mercer fired. The shot cracked sharp through the canyon. Hale staggered back. The revolver fell from his hand. Dust rose as he collapsed into the sand. Silence returned slowly. Smoke drifting through palm leaves. Warm sunlight spilling over the spring again. Rourke lowered his rifle. The riders were gone now. Those who could still move had fled the canyon. Mercer stood breathing hard. The fight finished. But the compass still rattled softly in Clara's hands. Tick. Scrape. Tick. And it still pointed west. The desert grew quiet again. Smoke drifted slowly above the palms. The spring whispered over stone like nothing had happened. Sunlight warmed the sand where the gunfire had torn it apart. Sheriff Daniel Mercer stood in the middle of the oasis breathing slowly. His revolver still hung loose in his hand. Victor Hale lay near the canyon mouth. Dust settled across his coat. No movement. No voice. Only the wind touching the red cliffs. Behind Mercer, Clara stepped carefully across the sand. Bare feet silent. The broken compass still clutched in her hands. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The sound felt softer now. Rourke leaned against the palm tree where the rope still hung loose. His rifle rested across his knees. "You really killed him?" Mercer didn't answer. He walked toward the spring. Knelt beside the water. Cold liquid ran over his hands as he washed the dust away. The fight had left the oasis scattered. Spent cartridges. Broken branches. A saddle lying on its side near the rocks. But the water kept flowing. Warm sunlight touched the surface. Clara crouched beside Mercer. She looked at the compass. Then at him. "My papa said the truth was inside." Mercer studied the small brass case. The cracked glass. The loose needle trembling inside. Tick. Scrape. Tick. "You said not yet," he reminded her. Clara looked toward the canyon where Hale lay. Then back at Mercer. Her voice came steady now. "I think it's time." She placed the compass carefully into his hands. The metal felt warm from the sun. But the needle still rattled strangely. Mercer turned the case slowly. His thumb found a thin seam along the edge. A latch. So small it almost disappeared into the brass. He pressed it. A soft click. The back plate lifted slightly. Rourke leaned forward. "Well, I'll be damned." Inside the compass sat a folded piece of paper. Thin. Yellowed. Carefully hidden beneath the mechanism. Mercer unfolded it slowly. The paper crackled in the warm air. A map. Hand-drawn. Lines marking the cliffs. The spring. The narrow canyon entrance. And a square boundary drawn around the oasis. Numbers filled the corners. Survey marks. Legal measurements. Clara's eyes widened. "My papa's writing." Mercer turned the page. Another sheet slid loose from the fold. He opened it. Ink had faded but the seal still showed clearly. A land claim. Signed. Stamped. Filed through the county office. Years ago. The name across the bottom read clearly. Elias Carter. Mercer looked at Clara. "Your father owned this land." Clara swallowed. "But Mr. Hale said..." Rourke laughed hoarsely. "Hale never owned a drop of it." The wind brushed through the palms again. Warm. Gentle. But the memory of the fight still lingered. Mercer looked toward the canyon. Hale's body lay still in the sand. The sheriff folded the papers carefully. "Your father knew they'd come." Clara nodded slowly. He hid the map. Her finger touched the compass. So the truth would survive. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The needle rattled softly again. Still pointing west. Mercer followed its direction. Toward the western cliffs beyond the oasis. The map showed something there too. A narrow trail. Leading deeper into the stone. Rourke squinted. "What's out there?" Mercer studied the paper again. His voice stayed quiet. "More water." The wind carried the smell of warm earth across the oasis. Hope. Life. Clara looked toward the cliffs. "My papa said the valley could feed towns." Mercer folded the map carefully. Slipped it back into the compass. The back plate clicked shut. Tick. Scrape. Tick. But the sound felt different now. Not broken. Not confused. Just waiting. Rourke rose slowly. His eyes scanned the canyon. "You still got Hale's riders out there somewhere?" Mercer nodded. "Maybe." The sheriff stood beside Clara. The sun warmed the oasis fully now. The fire pit crackled as fresh wood caught flame. Warmth spreading across the clearing again. Mercer looked down at the compass in Clara's hands. Then toward the open desert. The truth was finally out. And now the land had someone left to protect it. The desert changed slowly. Not in a day. Not in a season. But little by little the hidden oasis began to breathe differently. Morning light touched the palms with warm gold. The spring ran steady over the stones. Clear water whispering through the valley. Sheriff Daniel Mercer stood near the edge of the spring with a shovel resting against his shoulder. The ground beside the water was darker now. Damp. Soft. A narrow channel stretched away from the pool. Freshly dug. Rourke wiped sweat from his brow and tossed another rock from the trench. "Never figured I'd spend my life digging ditches." Mercer leaned on the shovel. "You ain't." Rourke smirked. "Feels like it." The water trickled slowly into the new channel. A thin ribbon at first. But steady. Clara ran along the edge of the ditch barefoot. Her laughter bounced against the cliffs. Light. Free. The sound filled the oasis in a way gunfire once had. Warm. Alive. Tick. Scrape. Tick. The compass hung from a cord around her neck. The brass case bounced lightly against her chest as she ran. The sound no longer felt sharp. No longer frantic. Just a small rhythm in the air. Clara stopped beside the channel. She crouched low. Touched the water with her fingers. "Look." Mercer stepped beside her. The stream had begun flowing toward the western trail. Just as the map had shown. Toward the valley beyond the cliffs. Rourke joined them. "Town's gonna lose its mind when they see this." Mercer nodded. "They'll see it." But his eyes moved toward the canyon mouth. The desert beyond still stretched wide and quiet. Empty. Months had passed since the fight. Still the memory lived there. In the silence. In the open horizon. Rourke noticed the look. "You think Hale's men come back?" Mercer shrugged slightly. "Men like that don't forget." The wind brushed softly through the palms. Leaves rustled overhead. Clara stood again. The compass tapped lightly against the brass button of her dress. Tick. Scrape. Tick. She held it in her hand. Opened the lid. The needle still trembled slightly. But it pointed steady now. West. Toward the new channel. Toward the valley that waited. "My papa would have liked this." Mercer looked down at her. "Your papa planned it." Clara smiled softly. The fire pit crackled nearby. Warm smoke drifted into the air. A wagon rolled slowly into the oasis from the canyon trail. Wood wheels creaking. Two dusty farmers climbed down. They stared at the spring like men seeing rain after drought. One of them removed his hat. "Sheriff Mercer?" Mercer nodded once. The man looked at the water, then at the new channel. His voice came quiet. "Is it true?" Mercer pointed toward the flowing ditch. "Help yourself." The farmer knelt. Scooped the cold water into his hands. For a moment he just stared at it. Then he drank. A long breath left his chest. Warm relief. The second farmer laughed softly. A tired laugh. The kind that carries hope. More wagons would come soon. More families. More fields growing beyond the cliffs. Clara closed the compass gently. The lid clicked shut. Tick. Scrape. Tick. But now the sound blended with better noises. Water running through fresh earth. Farmers talking quietly beside the spring. palm leaves brushing in the breeze. Mercer stood beside the fire, watching the oasis fill slowly with life. The desert wind passed through the valley again. Warm this time. The compass tapped softly against Clara's chest as she walked beside him. Tick. Scrape. Tick. A small sound. No longer lonely. Now it sounded like a heartbeat. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past, and your heart pointed west.